Good morning. Happy Monday. For those of you enjoying Veterans Day off, thank a veteran. There was a Juan Galt video and a Van Balen video that I found somewhat interesting. The Juan Galt video was Mark Stevens asking, I think it was Attorney General, the Robbie estrogen question.
What factual evidence do you have that the laws apply?
And the on-the-spot answer that the Attorney General, or DA, or whatever the hell he was, gave was, well, if you commit a crime in the state, there's people who committed crimes in the state, and they ended up in prison. They were forced to answer for their crimes. That is solid evidence that the crimes, or that the state has jurisdiction over those crimes and people. Mark Stevens' response was that it was an argument ad baculum, which is basically saying that there are consequences for the argument, or there are consequences for the action. It wasn't a logical argument. It was a statement of fact. It amazes me that sovereign citizens think they're smart and yet they know so little. Asking for factual evidence is not asking for a logical argument. If you want to ask for a logical argument, well, premise number one, Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Premise number two, in Article 4, Section 2, the supreme law of the land states that if you are charged with a crime in one state and you flee to another state, the state that charged you with a crime can demand your return to the home state, to that state, and the other state will return you to the state that has jurisdiction over your crime. So if you commit a crime in a state, what we can draw from that is that if you commit a crime in a state, that state has jurisdiction over the crime and over you. If they could demand your return, well, they've got jurisdiction over you, right? The law applies to you. Speaking of Article 4 deals with the relationship between the states and the relationship between the United States as an entity and the states as sub-entities. For those of you who still think Article 4, Section 4 guarantees that the United States itself will have a republican form of government, or a public government, a government form of a republic, you're still retarded. You're missing the first three articles. The first three articles guarantee the form of government that the United States will have. You could call it an orange, but that is still the form of government the United States will have. The United States will have a House of Representatives. The United States will have a Senate. The United States will have a president. The United States will have a Supreme Court and various other federal courts as implemented by Congress. That is the form of the United States government, no matter what Article 4 says. Article 4 is dealing with the states. Article 4 says that the states will have they will be republics. They will be republic forms of government. Not necessarily have the political party Republican installed, but they will be republics, thus preventing any coups or what have you. The states are going to be republics. The states, however, are not bound by the first three articles of the Constitution. And you can tell that because I'm going to guess it's Kansas. It might be Nebraska. It's one of those states in there. They only have a single, body of legislators. Most states are bicameral. Of course, the U.S. is bicameral. So I'm going to say that I'm going to call it Kansas, and I'm going to guess it's unicameral. But anyway, there you go. But again, the factual evidence that the laws apply is still a stupid question. It's something that's reserved for the trial court, for the finder of fact, on whether or not that particular law applies to your particular facts, or whether your facts apply to that law. But judges take judicial notice of the laws. So a judge in, let's say, Arizona, where Mark Stevens was speaking, is going to take judicial notice of the Constitution of Arizona and the laws of Arizona. He understands them. You don't need to put forth factual evidence of the existence of the Constitution or laws of the state of Arizona. The judge accepts them as existing and can reference them at will. And those particular laws and Constitution will state what crimes are and who their particular penal code, however it's formed, Arizona revised statutes, I think they call them, who those statutes apply to and how they apply. So you don't need to start off with the facts. The facts are going to vary case by case. The law is the rules by which you apply the facts. So if you're asking for the facts that show the rule exists, well, you could look them up in a code book. You can look them up you can look them up online. I mean, the Arizona revised statutes exist. Look them up. If you're not smart enough to look them up, have someone look them up for you, but they exist. They were implemented by the republic form of government that the United States Constitution demanded that each state takes, and each state has jurisdiction within its own borders. The rights not reserved to the United States are reserved to the people and to the states. Meth car. You gotta love meth cars. So one of the rights guaranteed to the states is general policing power. General policing power allows them to figure out what crimes are and figure out who those particular statutes apply to. And unless they fall short of the Fifth Amendment protections, which have applied to the states via the 14th Amendment, then there is no issue. Anyway, I hope I beat that horse to death. I'm sure I'm going to see more videos on it, but whatever. There was a video, I think Van Balen did, of a sovereign citizen in Hawaii who was trying the same bullshit. That particular one, I've seen this in another video. I think it was the Joshua Martinez video, where if it's the state that's the victim, then the state, well, then the crime has to be adjudicated in a federal court, is the claim, because the judge represents the state. And the judge does not represent the state. The prosecutor represents the state. Or if it's a civil action, maybe a petitioner, but if it's, or plaintiff would represent the state, or the state would be the plaintiff or petitioner or prosecutor. That's where I'm going with this. The state is the plaintiff, petitioner, or prosecutor, depending on how the hell they're in court. So the judge does not represent the state. The judge represents justice. And that's how, in case you're thinking that I'm stupid and it has to go to federal court, you may notice that there are federal court cases called US v. so-and-so or so-and-so v. the US. Those are heard in federal courts. Those are heard in US courts. They're not heard in state courts. They can't be heard in state courts. They get removed to the federal courts if they get filed in state courts, because they don't belong in state courts. State courts don't have power over the federal government. But in US v. state or state v. US, you may notice that the US doesn't always win, even though there are always US judges, right? And it's because those judges don't represent the US, they represent justice. They are looking at the laws and they're applying the laws, they're interpreting the laws. And the United States argues one way, and the defense argues the other way, or the plaintiff, the non-US, argues the other way. And the court figures out who has the better argument or what the best argument is. And that's why you saw things like James Freeman, when it was the United States v. James Freeman over the Fort Huachuca deal. James Freeman's not in custody. The court was not on the United States side. The court was impartial. The court was on the side of justice. I know a lot of you are skeptics and you don't believe that, but I challenge all of you skeptics to find all of the cases where the U.S. has lost, and the U.S. does lose, and explain to me with your silly notions that judges are always on the side of the United States or whatever state is employing them. Explain to me why the states or the United States lose. Because they do lose. Not all the time, but they lose. And you get to explain why. Now, I've definitely rambled for long enough. Thank you for watching. Have a great morning.